What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages? Joker back again once again, and today, people, today! You know what? Nothing quite puts a smile on my face like logging into YouTube, going over to my sub box, clicking on it, and seeing several of my contemporaries making videos addressing things I was talking about half a year ago. In this instance, it's about the crumbling state of Destiny 2 and the need for Destiny 3. There's nothing quite like the smell of being right in the morning, or ahead of the curve, depending on how you want to look at it.
Both is good.
But what is this? A video from Datto that completely and utterly misrepresents why the community believes that the engine is the problem and wants a Destiny 3 and a new engine? Oh no, say it ain't so!
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Well, time to pack it up, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages. Datto, the god of Destiny, and the only opinion on the internet that matters, has spoken. Of course, this is only the case when people agree with him and are not accusing him of being an elitist. I kid. I like Datto and I respect the fuck out of him. Which I know for some weird reason will be a controversial opinion somehow. And to be absolutely clear, I don't disagree with the entirety of the video. I agree with a lot of the content, I just disagree with the straw man premise. You can't really have this conversation about the state of the engine and the reason people believe that it's a problem without acknowledging that Bungie is the reason that people believe this. To do anything else is disingenuous. It's setting up a straw man for you to knock down. Ooh, the community is dumb. They came to this conclusion for no reason. And of course, I'm sure Twitter, Reddit, and all those other fine places will have civil discourse over this opinion and totally not claim it to be fact or the word of God or anything nonsensical like that. And I'm sure everybody will respect one another's opinion and try to seek understanding and common ground.
Are you serious?
So I don't think it's a newsflash to anyone to say that Destiny 2 is not in great shape on a very fundamental level, and has only been getting worse and worse. Now, I'm not going to sit here and opine like some legal expert on an engine that I've never used, but I also think it's a fair assumption to make that most of us nerds in the year of our Lord 2023 have either dabbled in game development, studied game development, taken game development courses, or modded a game. Does that make us experts? Does that even mean we know anything about anything? Absolutely positively not. However, I'm also not going to pretend that my general audience is a bunch of brain-dead idiots. It does nothing. More so when talking about the Tiger engine. For you see. The idea that the Tiger engine is the issue didn't just spontaneously generate into existence. People didn't just pull this out of their ass en masse because reasons, divine intervention, and magical pixie fairies. It had to come from somewhere. I mean, after all, why would thousands of people blame the connectivity of the game not on the servers, which you know would be the most logical thing to blame the issue on? No, people are blaming the engine, so there has to be a reason why. But before we get into it, land raiders are expensive, and they just got a huge buff in 10th edition. And they are not going to pay for themselves, nor will that 10th edition box set when that inevitably becomes pre-orderable, and then the website crashes, Games Workshop sells out instantly in 2.5 seconds, and the only people who actually got one are scalpers because Games Workshop is really bad at this. I'm not mad, you're mad.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
But hey, details. So here's a word from our sponsor. NordVPN is back again, once again, with an amazing offer. If you're watching this video, then I think it's certainly safe to say that you like being on the internet. I mean, you're watching a video on YouTube for a game that can only be played online, that you may or may not actually like. The internet is full of people looking to, at best, do a little trolling and DDoSing you to kick you off your favorite player-to-player connected game. At worst, they want to make a quick buck off your identity, ruining your day, if not week, month, life, or year. From MITM attacks, phishing, password attacks, DDoS attacks, which is one of the most inexpensive ways for people to cheat in online player-to-player connected games. The internet is full of people just looking to take advantage of you. Some of you might remember just seconds ago my talk about the new 10th edition box sets for Warhammer 40k. That wasn't just a cheeky justification for why I do these ad reads. Recently, Lionel Johnson, one of the Lost Primarchs, was reintroduced into the setting. The GW website was so inundated invaded by scalper bots that it crashed. And when it came back online, of course, the line was sold out. So what's a 40k player who wants a model supposed to do? Well, you can either wait or look to the aftermarket. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, where does NordVPN come into this story? Well, NordVPN helped out with the cavalcade of very sketchy websites that just kind of sort of appeared in the aftermath of the Lion's pre-order release, and will likely appear in the aftermath of 10th edition's release as well. With NordVPN's suite of security features, I knew I could confidently click on websites with features like threat protection and not have to worry about the website being dangerous, because threat protection wouldn't even let me go on the website if it was. And while I wasn't at the time able to find a reasonably priced Lion, I didn't pick up any unwanted security risk or have my data compromised while searching. And you know what? That's a win. Now I know what you're thinking. But Joker, VPNs are expensive. Well, that's where you're wrong. Because users can use my link, nordvpn.com/budjoker, to get a huge discount with the purchase of a 2-year plan plus 4 additional months for free. And the best part, it's risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. So protect yourself before you wreck yourself with NordVPN. And with that, I'd like to thank NordVPN for sponsoring the channel. Now, back to the video. So as we get into this, I want to be as painfully clear as humanly possible, because if I've learned anything about people on the internet, it is that they will always misinterpret what you're saying, because comprehension of basic linguistic concepts is hard for some people. More so when they're already poised to disagree with whatever you say, no matter what you say, a real pancakes and waffles situation. I'm not arguing in any way, shape, or form that Destiny needs a new engine. Let me go ahead and repeat that for you fanboys. I am not arguing in any way, shape, or form that Destiny needs a new engine. Hey, hold on, let me do it a little slower. I am not arguing in any way, shape, or form that Destiny needs a new engine. I am arguing the reason people believe it needs a new engine. Keyword, believe. So I don't want to see any of this, but Joker, Destiny doesn't need a new engine. How dare you say that? Comments below. There's a difference between explaining why something happened, why people believe something, and agreeing with it. Are we all on the same page? Of course not. This is the internet. Why does anyone even bother?
Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
So personally, I think a fairly good case can be made that Bungie's engine is not the reason for every problem with Destiny. It is the foundation of Destiny 2, which is completely different than the engine of Destiny 2, that is the issue. Something we'll get into later. However, if that's the case, why do so many people randomly, suddenly, out of almost nowhere, believe that's the case?
What Bungie decided was, we can't do this anymore. This is just too much. This is too hard for us to do. The tools that we work with are really hard to deal with. It's hard for us to make this much content. It's just hard making content in general.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
I wonder why people would get the impression that maybe the tools are the problem.
The world may never know.
But Joker, that quote's from forever ago. They've obviously fixed and updated their tools since then. They've said as much in the various Vidocs. It's actually a selling point. But I hear you loud and clear and can promise we are doing everything we can. The disadvantage of an older, uniquely created engine is ... well, you see. April 20th, 2023. Ooh, that's not a good thing, right? Yeah, no, that doesn't sound like a good thing. Not a lot of ambiguity there, right? I mean, when you spend the better part of a decade of development with
the tools that we work with are really hard to deal with. It's hard for us to make this much content. It's just hard making content in general.
As your go-to PR cleanup for why things are the way they are.
Joker!
I hear you cry out in your shrill, tremulous voice.
That's just a community manager. They don't know what they're talking about.
And you know what? For as derogatory as that may sound, fair point. But the conversation isn't, is the engine the problem? The conversation is, why does the community believe that it's a problem? It's hard to argue that there's not a pattern of Bungie's tools being blamed by the company or people who investigate and speak on behalf of the company. So given Bungie's history of blaming their tools for damage control, is it really any wonder that people believe that the tools are the problem? No, and I don't think it's terribly unreasonable. So now that we've established that it's not necessarily unreasonable to believe this, or why people do believe this, what are my thoughts? Well, we know from Bungie's 2015 GDC presentation that the Tiger engine is just a heavily modified version of the Blam engine. The reason for that is because Bungie wanted to take the networking and gameplay frameworks from Halo and bring them over to Destiny because they didn't know if they could replicate it. So for the sake of argument, argument if we want Destiny to feel like Destiny, the Tiger engine is non-negotiable. So is there any solution? Is there any fix? What can we do? Well, there is a solution, just a lot of people aren't going to like it because it will require a hard reset. I mean, so would changing engines, but hey, fucking details. The point is, we need a Destiny 3 because the very foundation of Destiny 2, not to be confused with the engine of Destiny 2, has outlived its expiration date by many, many, many years. What do I mean? Well, it may surprise some of you who are not grizzled veterans that Destiny 2 was not meant to last forever. So because every video is somebody's first, and I actually made the mistake of taking for granted that everybody knew Bungie blamed their tools, and that was a common thing, I thought. According to the contract that Bungie had with Activision, they were on the line for 4 games and all the DLC between them. During the development of Destiny 2, it would suffer an 11th hour reboot in 2016. We don't know as much about that reboot as we do the Destiny 1 reboot. What we do know is, for whatever reason, Bungie had a staff reorganization. During this process, Taken King director Luke Smith and executive producer Mark Noseworthy would become respectively director and executive producer of Destiny 2. They would, for whatever reason, reboot the story that had been written up until that point. And at this time, for reasons I'm sure are completely and utterly unconnected, a number of veteran Bungie staffers would leave the studio. So Destiny 2 didn't have the smoothest of developments, but you know what? That's okay, right? Because even if you fuck up this time, there's Destiny 3, and you can take everything that you learned from Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 and build Destiny 3. And it seems like this was the thought process as well, because all the way back in 2020, before Beyond Light released, the engineering director, David Aldridge, would say in a blog post on Bungie.net, they believed that Destiny 2's arc, when they released it, would look a lot like Destiny 1's, a couple of expansions and then a sequel. So Destiny 2 was designed with the idea that there would be a Destiny 3 and a Destiny 4. On a foundational level, they expected the game to last 2 years as per their contract with Activision and then be replaced by Destiny 3. On top of that, development was a mess, or at least one would assume it was a mess given how things played out. Management was shifted around, a lot of people left, the original game director of Destiny 2 is quote-unquote no longer with the company, and Bungie was given a year by Activision to get their shit in order and get Destiny 2 out the door, or risk consequences by defaulting on their contract. So with all that, I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination to say that Destiny 2's foundation was not meant to last. It was supposed to expire back in 2018, 2019, and here we are in 2023. And in that time, a lot of things have happened to Destiny 2. It went from Halo with extra steps to an MMO, at least according to Bungie, all having content and systems being added to it and ripped from it. Destiny 2 has been showing its age since Shadowkeep, has stagnated in terms of innovation and evolution since Forsaken, has become more reliant on Horde mode, not Horde mode content, Destiny 1 content, and copy-paste content, and with each DLC, with each update, that foundation cracks more and more and more. One does have to wonder how much of Destiny 2's development resources are going to keeping the foundation in some semblance of what somebody might call together and the game running, because those resources sure as shit aren't going to game modes, PvP maps, loot, or the story, which inevitably brings us back to the point of the video, the solution. Destiny 2 cannot go on forever. If you've been paying any attention to the progress of Destiny 2 over the last couple of years since the bolting on of the MMO portion to the game, you'll notice that it takes us years and years to get fairly basic features. Now you could just chalk this up to games as a service being games as a service, and they need to plan out content, and they get to it when they get to it, even if it's something that could have been used yesterday. Destiny is, after all, more or less tech debt the game, where Bungie quite often chooses to implement features that are, well, half-baked. A lot. In fact, you could say that this might be the reason that Destiny has felt like it's in a perpetual beta, because, well, it is. That being said, I do think it's a little more complicated than that. I mean, it's one thing when your tools are hard to use. Combine that with a game foundation that is not just years out of date, but the cost of implementing systems and upgrading the foundation is apparently too much, at least according to Bungie's head engineer. Like most things, it's all solvable. It's just expensive. And so far we've concluded that it makes more sense to spend on more cool experiences instead. This all would have been much cheaper if we considered it at the system design stage and force more modularity around things we might want to make secret in the future. But we had a lot of other priorities on our minds back then and didn't foresee the future value of secrets and surprises. Yeah, I would think that they would have a lot of other priorities on their mind considering the development of Destiny 2. Makes sense to me. What I believe this more or less demonstrates is there are things that the Tiger engine can do that the base foundation of Destiny doesn't allow them to do, because they didn't know what kind of game Destiny 2 is going to be. They didn't start calling Destiny 2 an MMO until Shadowkeep. Destiny as a franchise has had an identity crisis since day one. So when you don't know what type of game you're making, or you think you're just making Halo with extra steps, which is what Destiny 2 shipped as, how do you know what kind of foundational systems and infrastructure you need? When you think the game you're working on is going to be replaced in 2 to 3 years, you don't think about what the game's going to look like in 5, 6, because why would you plan for it to evolve from Halo with extra steps to an RPG to a full-blown MMO, at least according to Bungie? Again, you wouldn't. And while they could attempt to add those systems now, as David said, the cost is too much. And that makes sense. It's not necessarily the cost of creating and designing the system, right? It's the cost of creating, designing the system, then implementing it in the game, and now testing everything that it's going to be interacting with, and that stuff interacts with. On a small scale, that's manageable. On a scale like Destiny 2 with the sheer amount of content in the game, and I'm not just talking about story modes, destinations, raids, strikes, PvP maps, from text to sound files, to JPEGs of things that aren't even accessible in the game, but only viewable through the API. We are talking about having to test something that you add to the foundation against billions of pieces of content. And yeah, I'm sure there's ways that this process has been streamlined, but we're still talking millions of pieces of content here. I have to imagine to do this with multiple systems, the cost would be so astronomically exponential that you might as well just make a new game. Now I know what you're thinking,
But Joker, if Bungie made a new game, that would mean we'd have content droughts, and that would kill the franchise.
oh, I hate hearing this. That is just, and you hear it so much. Yeah, that only works if you ignore the fact that, well, going dark is basically how every video game ever before the last few years went from one iteration to the next. And I know this might sound surprising, but some still do this. Furthermore, a franchise going dark builds anticipation for the next release. On top of that, Destiny 1 had 2 more or less back-to-back one-year content droughts after the release of a main expansion. Taken King had a one-year content drought, more or less. Rise of Iron had a one-year content drought, more or less. But with all that said, first, if Destiny as a franchise needs constant updates to stay relevant, are you a fan or are you addicted? Second, if Bungie stopped all development on Destiny 2 content, it's not like PvP or Gambit players would even notice. And lastly, the idea that Bungie would have to stop supporting Destiny 2 in order to make Destiny 3 is kinda weird if you ask me. So you're telling me Bungie can, somehow, someway, through some Herculean leap in logic that us mere mortals will never understand, work on Matter and 1 or 2, maybe even 3 unknown IP other projects, while building and supporting Destiny 2, but they can't put a team together of people who are new hires, grizzled vets, or anyone in between. Or, you know, hire basically anyone they want throughout the entire gaming industry to build a Destiny 3? I mean, it's not like they don't have the money. Look, I'm not trying to sound like an armchair dev here. I'm not trying to say that this would be quick or easy or anything like that. But this sounds less like a development issue and more like a logistics issue. And not even really that, because this is basically what they had already agreed to do under their contract with Activision, so you have to imagine they'd already considered the logistics of this and how to pull it off at some point. Again, I'm kind of sick and tired of people treating Bungie like they're new, like they just started a development studio 5 years ago. They've been doing this for 30 years, so they don't need your excuses to defend them, they need to produce results. Under Activision, they would have had to support Destiny 2 while building Destiny 3, and they would have had to support Destiny 3 while building Destiny 4, just like they're supporting Destiny 2 right now while building Matter, an unknown Project 1 and maybe 2. And you know what, just a little fun aside, because we are speaking about the Activision Bungie agreement, did you know that Bungie and Activision agreed that it would only take $500 million to support Destiny for 10 years? To put that into perspective, that's only 13.9% of the $3.6 billion Sony bought Bungie for. Another thing that I'm just throwing out there for no particular reason whatsoever, in 2019 it was reported that Destiny 2 made $300 million in digital sales alone, which largely comes from the cash shop, so you know they're making profit hand over fist, because when you consider the work and effort it takes to make a $15 to $20 set of armor versus the cost and effort of making a $10 to $50 DLC, cosmetics are clearly very profitable, at least comparatively speaking to what it costs to develop a game over 10 years, which I mean, 300 million, 500 million. And hey, you know, I have to assume after paying people, 401ks, insurance, profit share, paying out to the board of directors, keeping the lights on, Pizza Wednesday, Taco Tuesday, there might be a pretty penny left over. Then again, I have absolutely positively no idea how some of these companies make a game for a couple $1 million. Obviously, there must be some kind of tax evasion or false reporting because clearly, duh. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Can you tell I'm being facetious? Jokes aside, the development of Destiny 3 isn't a game development issue. It's a logistics issue. No, seriously, it is. As the old wise game developer saying goes, you can be the best programmer in the world, but if you try to invade Russia during winter, you're gonna get trapped in the snow and your army's going to starve to death, or something like that. Basically meaning all the talent and skill in the world doesn't mean shit for fuck if you don't have any logistics. And that's what Destiny 3 is, a logistics problem. Bungie doesn't have a resource problem, Bungie doesn't have a talent problem, they can literally hire whomever they want, and from a business standpoint, from a logistical standpoint, not from a day-to-day worker grind standpoint, making a Destiny 3 would be one of the easiest things that Bungie has ever done. So why don't they? Well, I mean, maybe they already are. After all, we are heading to the end of the Light and Darkness saga, and logically speaking, if Bungie was going to make the break to a Destiny 3, the end of the Light and Darkness saga is, you know, kinda sorta the perfect time to do it. I wonder how many people are surprised that I gave Bungie the benefit of doubt there. I know, this sounds really negative, but then we get to the kind of the end point, and the takeaway basically boils down to, I really hope Bungie is as competent as I think they are, because I would rather Bungie be this greedy corporate entity that is doing as little work as possible, and you know, maybe if push comes to shove, they do something silly like fix their game, innovate their game, bring new life to their game, because they're capable of doing it. I would rather those options than Bungie just being grossly incompetent. You might argue that that kind of sounds negative, but really, it's hopeful. The idea that Bungie has just stumbled into success is just kind of depressing. Then again, I guess the whole conversation around Destiny 2 is kind of depressing. I mean, think about the fanboys' defense here for a moment. Destiny 2 is all Destiny can or ever will be. 10 more years of Destiny 2. Bungie can't make a Destiny 3. Bungie can't change the engine. Bungie can't do this. Bungie can't do that. Just accept Destiny 2 the way it is. Don't hope for anything. Don't push for change. If you do, you're toxic. You're negative. Why can't you just shut up so I don't have to think about the state of the game? So I can live in ignorant bliss. I don't know, I just feel like that's super depressing and a really negative way to look at change and innovation. But I digress. So I think it's safe to say that Destiny 2 needs to eventually be replaced, preferably sooner rather than later. The reality is, things can't keep going on the way they're going on. And to be entirely honest, all these Destiny defenders running around telling people not to be armchair game devs, they're full of shit. I guarantee you the Venn diagram of people bitching about armchair developers and people that would bitch if you dared criticize something without offering a solution is damn near a perfect circle. Because the reality is, they don't want to have the conversation at all. It's very cultish, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. If you have a critique, if you have a criticism, if you think Bungie fucked up, and you don't offer a solution, well, you're just whining. If you do offer a solution, then you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Stop being an armchair developer. It's so intellectually dishonest, it's not even funny. If Bungie's out there saying,
the tools that we work with are really hard to deal with, it's hard for us to make this much content, it's just hard making content in general.
I mean, I don't know shit for fuck about plumbing, but if a plumber comes in to fix something and they go,
the tools that we work with are really hard to deal with,
and then they don't even really fix the problem, but still expect to get paid for their job? Just a guess here, but I'm thinking anyone would have a problem with that. Maybe, just maybe, you would make the suggestion that they get better tools, if the tools are the problem. In fact, you'd probably just hire a different plumber. Bungie is going to ultimately do what Bungie's ultimately going to do. All this conversation, all this talk, are people who are passionate about the game, not want to see the game stagnate and die, they want to see it succeed and deliver on its promise. Here's the reality that a lot of people seem to forget. Bungie has the luxury of getting to do what they do at the indulgence of the community. Without that, there's no Bungie. One need only look to the proverbial graveyard of failed live service games, Halo, Anthem, Marvel, or just failed games in general. failed franchises, failed studios. Studios that were once great, IPs that were once great, that fell victim to corporate greed and mediocrity. Corporations, businesses, and game developers get to continue doing what they're doing at the consumer's indulgence. With all that said, just because something should happen doesn't mean it will. As I've already stated, the idea that Destiny 2 can serve as the foundation of the franchise in perpetuity is silly. Not because it's technically impossible. Bungie can keep piling on DLC after DLC after DLC and deal with the consequences as they arrive. But where does that leave us? Well, like I said earlier, Bungie's going to do what Bungie's going to do. It doesn't matter. This is all academic. Conversations for the sake of conversations. Nobody has an answer. We're all just making this up as we go along. No one can ever know until a solution is tried that any solution is universally, ultimately, the right solution. If Destiny wants to be an MMO, then it needs to learn from its predecessors. If you look back at the history of Final Fantasy XIV, it's actually eerie how similar the two's development histories are. So when I look at Final Fantasy XIV and I look at their GDC presentation, there's some very good advice that can be taken away for Bungie. Running an MMORPG is like running a country. 1. If the dev team is the government, then the players are the citizens. If citizens disapprove of your policies, they'll move to Canada. 2. Clarity, vision, and a willingness to listen are keys to success. Without these, the government devolves into a dictatorship. 3. Learn to listen and adapt. A complaint is worth twice a compliment. The silent always leave first. If citizens are complaining, it means they still care. 4. Creators must be players of their own realms. If the leaders don't live there, why would their subjects? 3 easy steps to failure. An unhealthy obsession with graphic quality. A surprising lack of MMORPG knowledge amongst development team. The mindset that the solution to every problem could be patched in a future update. I wonder where I've heard that before. Forget about hearing it or reading it before in their GDC 2022 presentation. How about the fact that we experience it firsthand while playing Destiny? Destiny is a game that lives in tech debt. But what can anyone really do? Destiny has too much of a installed, psychotically loyal fan base for any sort of boycott or stop playing the game thing to work, to get their attention. Unless a significant portion of the player base does it in a short time. 1 or 2 players here, 20, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, doesn't matter. You'd have to have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. But Bungie's gonna do whatever the fuck Bungie wants to do and whatever's best for them as a corporation. So circles and circles. At the end of the day, no one has the answer. It is what it is. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Remember to like, but only if you did. Subscribe for more. Feel free to donate to my Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous. And above all else, stay frosty.